The air in the court of the Crimson Moon was always cold, smelling of ancient stone, dried herbs, and a faint, metallic hint of blood. It was a scent that Lyra, princess of the Nocturne, had known all her life. As the only known vampire-werewolf hybrid, her very existence was a paradox, a fragile treaty made flesh and blood. Her mother, the last Werewolf Alpha of the Silvermane pack, and her father, the vampire lord of the Crimson Court, were long dead, their love story a tragic legend that had ended the century-long war. Lyra was the living peace accord, raised by a council from both species, belonging to both and, in the eyes of many, to neither. Tonight, the tension in the throne room was thicker than blood. Kaelen, Alpha of the Silvermane pack, stood before her, his broad shoulders straining against the fine linen of his tunic. He was all sun-bronzed skin and wildfire energy, his amber eyes glowing with a ferocity that was barely contained. He had just returned from the northern borders, and the scent of pine and raw power rolled off him. "They are encroaching on our hunting grounds, Lyra," he growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her very bones. "The nightshade vampires. They ignore the boundary markers. If they slaughter all the game, my people will starve come winter." From the shadows beside the obsidian throne, Lord Valerius emerged. He moved with a silent, liquid grace that was both beautiful and unnerving. Pale as moonlight, his eyes the color of deep wine, he was ancient power dressed in black velvet and silver thread. He looked at Kaelen with a cool, detached amusement that he reserved solely for the Werewolf Alpha. "The game, as you so brutishly call it, Kaelen, are mindless beasts," Valerius said, his voice a silken whisper that somehow filled the hall. "The northern forests are vast. There is enough for all. Your wolves are simply inefficient hunters." Kaelen's fists clenched, and Lyra saw the telltale ripple of fur threatening to break through his skin. "You would understand inefficiency, Valerius, spending half the night composing sonnets instead of tending to your people's needs." They were at each other's throats, as always. But Lyra could see what others missed. The way Kaelen's gaze flickered to her after his retort, seeking her approval. The way Valerius's cool facade cracked with a minuscule, almost possessive glance in her direction when Kaelen stepped too close to her throne. They were not just rivals for territory. They were rivals for her. And she, the hybrid princess caught between moon and night, was in love with them both. Lyra's love isn't a simple case of being torn between two suitors, it's an embodiment of the two halves of her soul. Kaelen, the Alpha, speaks to her werewolf nature. With him, she feels the raw, untamed power of the moon. His love is fierce, protective, and passionate, a warmth that promises wild runs through the forest, the comfort of a pack, and a love that is as honest and brutal as a primal instinct. He represents her connection to the earth, to family, and to untamed freedom. Valerius, the vampire lord, calls to her vampire heritage. With him, she feels the ancient, profound depth of the night. His love is intellectual, possessive, and eternal, a cool, mesmerizing depth that promises centuries of shared wisdom, the beauty of art and music in silent castles, and a love that is as complex and refined as a centuries-old wine. He represents her connection to history, to elegance, and to the mysterious power of the unseen. The torment of choice, to choose one would feel like annihilating a part of herself. Denying Kaelen would be like locking away her wolf, caging a vital, passionate part of her spirit. It would be a betrayal of the sunlight, of instinct, of the mother she never knew. She would forever feel incomplete, like she was living in a perpetual twilight, denying the warmth she craves. Denying Valerius would be like severing her connection to the night, ignoring the ancient blood that sings in her veins. It would be a rejection of sophistication, of timelessness, of the father whose legacy she carries. She would feel unmoored, like a fleeting mortal in a world of eternal beings, denying the depth she understands. The weight of legacy and peace, her dilemma is compounded by her role as the living peace accord. Her very purpose is to unite, not to choose sides. A public choice could shatter the fragile treaty. Choosing the Alpha could be seen by the vampires as a return to primal dominance, undermining the sophisticated structure of the court. Choosing the vampire lord could be seen by the werewolves as a submission to the cold, manipulative ways they distrust, making her seem like a puppet of the night. She fears that any choice would not only break her own heart but could also break the world she is sworn to protect. Her personal desire is inextricably linked to the fate of two entire species. The nature of the love itself, her love for each is different, yet equally real and all-consuming. It's not that she loves Kaelen more or Valerius better, she loves them differently. It's the difference between a roaring heathfire and the mesmerizing, cold light of the moon. One does not negate the other, they simply exist as two powerful, opposing forces within her. Enough, Lyra commanded, her own voice a unique blend of werewolf strength and vampire compulsion. The power in it silenced them instantly. She stood, her gown of silver and black pooling around her. I will not have the peace my parents died for shattered over a few deer. I will go to the northern border myself. I will see the truth. Both men immediately protested, stepping forward in unison. It's too dangerous, Kaelen said, his concern a physical heat. It is beneath you, my princess, Valerius purred, his concern icy and sharp. I am the only one who can walk in both worlds without prejudice, she stated, her hybrid eyes, one amber, one crimson, holding each of their gazes in turn. You will both accompany me. And you will hold your tongues, or I will hold them for you. The journey north was a tense, silent affair. Kaelen moved through the dense forest like a part of it, a shadow among the trees. Valerius drifted soundlessly above the undergrowth, a specter in the moonlight. Lyra walked the earth, feeling the pull of the moon on her wolf blood and the thirst of the night on her vampire soul. They found the truth, but it was far worse than disputed hunting grounds. In a clearing, they found a scene of horrific slaughter. Dozens of deer, ripped apart not for food, but for sport. And carved into the bark of the central oak was a symbol that made Lyra's blood run cold, a twisted dagger dripping with moonlight, the sign of the shattered Fang, a fanatical sect of werewolves who rejected the peace and worshipped the old ways of war. This, Kaelen breathed, horror-struck. This was not us. Lyra, I swear it. But before Lyra could respond, a group of vampires descended from the trees, led by a sneering captain from the Nightshade clan. They took in the slaughter, the symbol, and the Alpha standing in the midst of it all. Traitor! The captain hissed, fangs bared. The Alpha breaks the treaty. Seize him! Kaelen roared, beginning his transformation. The vampires surged forward. Stop! Lyra's voice cracked like a whip, but the bloodlust was upon them. They ignored her. It was Valerius who moved. In a blur of impossible speed, he placed himself between the vampires and the transforming Alpha. You will not touch him, Valerius said, and his ancient power flooded the clearing, freezing the Nightshade vampires in their tracks. You will heed your princess. But the distraction cost him. From the tree-line, a silver-tipped bolt, designed to pierce a vampire's heart, shot out. It was meant for Kaelen. But in that split second, as Valerius defended his rival, his body was exposed. Lyra saw it first. With a hybrid speed, she moved. The bolt meant for the Alpha, deflected by the Lord, was intercepted by the princess. It struck Lyra in the shoulder, and a scream of pure agony was torn from her throat. Silver for the wolf, hawthorn for the vampire. Agony, pure and absolute, erupted through her dual nature, and she collapsed. The world exploded. Kaelen's transformation completed in a surge of rage and grief. His massive, jet-black wolf form launched itself at the hidden assassin, the sound of breaking bones echoing in the sudden silence. He recalled the first time he met Princess Lyra. The memory was etched into Kaelen's soul, sharper and more vivid than any battle scar. He had been newly crowned Alpha of the Silvermane Pack, a title he'd won not just through strength but in the bloody aftermath of his father's death at the fangs of a rogue vampire sect. He was young, simmering with grief and a rage so hot it threatened to burn away his reason. The summons to the court of the Crimson Moon was an insult, a demand for fealty from the ancient bloodsucker who had, in Kaelen's eyes, stood by while his father was slaughtered. He'd stormed into the palace with his beta and 2 elders, a wall of muscle and fury. The cold, scentless air of the vampire stronghold choked him. It was a dead place, a tomb. The opulent black stone, the silent, pale courtiers who watched him with mocking, crimson eyes, it was everything his pack stood against. He was here to snarl his defiance, to make it clear that the new Alpha would not be as diplomatic as the last. He was led into the grand throne room. There, on a dais, sat Lord Valerius, looking bored and ancient, his power a cold pressure in the room that made Kaelen's fur bristle beneath his skin. And then he saw her. She was seated slightly to the right of the throne, not on it, a place of honor but also of separation. The hybrid princess. He'd heard the stories, of course. A living monument to a dead peace. He expected a freak, a pitiable creature caught between two natures, a political tool. He was not prepared for her. She was harmony. Where the vampires were pale and the werewolves sun-touched, her skin was the color of creamed honey. Her hair was a cascade of night-dark waves, but it held the wildness of a wolf's mane. And her eyes, by the moon, her eyes. One was the warm, molten amber of his own people, a glimpse of a sun-drenched forest. The other was a deep, captivating crimson, a pool of ancient night. They were the eyes of a paradox, and they saw right through his rage. Their gazes locked. And his wolf, which had been a roaring, furious thing inside him since his father's death, went utterly silent. It wasn't a flinch or a retreat. It was a stillness so profound it was like the moment before the first breath. The constant, grinding anger that had been his fuel evaporated. In its place was a feeling so vast and unfamiliar it stole the air from his lungs. Recognition. A low, involuntary sound built in his chest. It wasn't a growl of threat. It was a rumble of pure, primal yearning. His wolf, his fierce and loyal companion, was not looking at a princess or a hybrid or a political symbol. It was looking at its mate. The instinct was absolute, undeniable, a law written deeper than any pack code or treaty. Every fiber of his being, every primal urge, screamed one thing: mine. Ours. The world narrowed to her. The sneering vampires, the cold lord on his throne, the weight of his own grief, it all faded into a dull hum. He could hear the unique symphony of her life, the strong, steady heartbeat of her wolf blood, a rhythm that called to his own, and the softer, whispering hum of her vampire essence, a mysterious and alluring song. He could smell her scent, and it was his undoing: wild jasmine and cool night air, fresh soil and ancient parchment. It was the scent of everything he'd ever wanted and never known he was missing. His wolf didn't yearn to be with her, it yearned to be part of her. To stand at her side, to guard her back, to run with her under the full moon, to warm her with his own body in the endless vampire night. It was a need so profound it was terrifying. He barely registered the formalities, the cool words exchanged between Valerius and his beta. He couldn't speak. He, the new Alpha who had come to issue a challenge, was rendered utterly mute by a girl half his size. As they were dismissed and forced to turn away, the spell broke just enough for pain to lance through him. Pulling away from her felt like tearing his own skin off. His wolf howled in silent protest, a sound of such profound loss that it shook him to his core. He didn't remember leaving the palace. He only remembered stumbling out into the night, the cold air hitting him like a physical blow. He fell to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his human form feeling like a cage. His beta placed a worried hand on his shoulder. "Alpha, what is it? What did they do to you?" Kaelen looked up, his amber eyes glowing with a new, terrifying fire. The rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, aching need that was infinitely more powerful. "They did nothing," he rasped, his voice raw with emotion. "They simply showed me the reason I will never be able to wage war against them again." From that day forward, his entire world reoriented. His duty was no longer just to his pack. It was to her. To a princess in a castle of shadows, whose very existence had tamed the furious wolf and replaced its anger with a single, unwavering, and impossible purpose, her. Valerius's icy composure shattered. A scream of primordial fury erupted from him as he cradled Lyra's shuddering form. His eyes burned with a crimson fire that promised eternal torment to whoever had done this. He tore the bolt free, and Lyra cried out again, her blood, both red and tinged with silver, soaking her gown. The nightshade vampires fled into the night, terrified by the unleashed fury of their lord and the savage roars of the Alpha. Kaelen, back in his human form, bloodied and breathless, stumbled to her side. He fell to his knees opposite Valerius. The ancient rivals looked at each other over the body of the woman they loved, and for the first time, they saw not an opponent, but a mirror of their own despair. "She is dying," Valerius whispered, his voice raw with an emotion he had not felt in centuries. Utter helplessness. "No," Kaelen growled, his hand trembling as he brushed a strand of hair from Lyra's fevered brow. "We won't let her." Their hands, one calloused and warm, the other pale and cold, met over her heart. A werewolf's vitality, a vampire's ancient energy, two opposing forces that had created her. Could they now sustain her? Driven by a desperate, unified need, they poured their strength into her. Kaelen's life force, fierce and healing, flowed into her, fighting the silver's poison. Valerius's dark energy, sustaining and timeless, fought the hawthorn's decay, knitting her vampire flesh back together. For the first time in 400 years, Lord Valerius' lifeless eyes watered. His emotion was everywhere and he did little to keep it at bay. The first time he truly saw her, she was 16. It was in the palace's grand library, a cavernous hall that smelled of dust, dried ink, and the ghosts of old magic. Valerius was searching for an obscure text on celestial alignments, moving through the shadows as was his habit. And then he heard it. A sound so foreign in this place of deathly quiet it was like a physical blow. Singing. It was a low, humming melody, something old and wild, a werewolf folk tune. But the voice was not a wolf's rough cadence. It was clear and cool, layered with a vampire's innate compulsion, making the simple melody resonate with a haunting, unearthly beauty. It was a paradox-given sound. He drifted, silent as a wisp of smoke, toward the source. There, in a pool of moonlight streaming through a high, arched window, sat the hybrid princess. She was curled in a large velvet chair, a massive book open in her lap. Her head was bent over it, her dark hair falling around her face. One slender finger, tipped with a claw he knew she could retract at will, traced the lines of text as she hummed. She was the picture of vampire refinement, poised, quiet, surrounded by knowledge. And yet, the song on her lips was one of wolfish campfires and running under open skies. The moonlight, which had no power over him, seemed to love her, caressing the warmth of her skin. He stood there, a centuries-old monster, utterly captivated. He must have made a sound, the faintest intake of breath that was not necessary for him. Her head snapped up, and her eyes found his. One eye, the color of rich earth and amber, held the wary, intelligent gleam of the wolf. The other, a deep, luminous crimson, held the ancient, knowing gaze of his own kind. In that moment, the equation in his mind shattered. She was not vampire plus werewolf. She was something entirely new. Something unique in all the world. He expected her to flinch, to lower her gaze, to show the fear or deference every other creature in his court showed him. She did not. She simply looked at him, her singing ceasing. A faint, curious smile touched her lips. "Lord Valerius," she said. Her voice was that same paradox, a young woman's tone, layered with the authority of a princess and the subtle, compelling weight of vampire power. "Do you need this volume? I fear I've become rather engrossed." She held up the book. It was a history of the very war her parents had ended. He found himself stepping out of the shadows, something he never did. He moved to stand beside her chair, not to loom, but to see the page. An inflammatory choice for bedtime reading, princess. She looked back at the illustrations of battles between their kinds. "It's important to know the cost of the peace we enjoy," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "So we know what not to become again." The simplicity of the statement, its profound wisdom, struck him with the force of a physical blow. He, who had lived through those wars, who had orchestrated their strategies, had never distilled it to something so pure. What not to become again? He looked down at her, not at the hybrid, the asset, the equation, but at Lyra. He saw the intelligence in her gaze, the weight of her legacy on her young shoulders, and the stunning, impossible courage it took to sit in a vampire's palace and sing a wolf's song, unafraid. A feeling, long atrophied from disuse, stirred in the frozen depths of his chest. It wasn't the fiery, possessive claim of the werewolf. It was something colder, deeper, and infinitely more terrifying for a being like him. It was the awe of a collector who has found the one, perfect, priceless masterpiece after centuries of acquiring mere treasures. It was the reverence of an immortal who, after seeing countless sunrises and wars and empires turn to dust, has finally found something new. His love did not yearn to run with her. It yearned to preserve her. To build a world of perfect, elegant safety around her so that her unique light would never be extinguished. To spend the next eternity unraveling the mystery of her, page by page, word by word. He did not touch her. He simply inclined his head, a gesture of respect he afforded to no one else. "Do not let me disturb you, princess," he said, and his voice, usually so laced with irony or cold command, was gentle. "The library, and all within it, are at your disposal." As he retreated back into the shadows, leaving her to her book and her moonlight, Valerius felt the foundations of his ancient world tremble. The curiosity was gone. In its place was a devotion so absolute it was akin to faith. He had not met a political tool. He had met his queen. And from that night on, every move he made, every cold calculation, every waged battle of wit with the brash Alpha, was for one purpose: to ensure that the one perfect, miraculous thing in his endless existence would forever remain, and one day rule. Lyra gasped, her back arching as their powers, moon and night, warred within her not for dominance, but for her salvation. They fused inside her, a perfect, painful, and powerful symbiosis. The wound began to close. The silver and hawthorn were forced out, rejected by the very duality they sought to destroy. Her eyes fluttered open. One amber, one crimson. She saw them both above her, their hands on her, their faces etched with a fear and a devotion that transcended their ancient feud. In that moment she understood. She was the bridge. Not just between two species, but between two hearts. Kaelen looked at Valerius, seeing not a cold-blooded monster, but the being who had thrown himself in front of a silver bolt for him. Valerius looked at Kaelen, seeing not a brutish animal, but a leader willing to kneel in the dirt and pour out his own life force for her. The shared glance was not one of truce, but of revelation. Lyra slowly sat up, her body humming with a new, combined strength. She took their hands, lacing her fingers with theirs, the warm and the cold, the rough and the smooth. "The shattered Fang seeks to divide us," she said, her voice stronger now. "They know our greatest weakness is not each other, but the love you both hold for me, and the love you refuse to acknowledge for each other." She looked from Kaelen's fierce, loyal eyes to Valerius's ancient, depthless ones. "My heart does not choose between the moon and the night," she whispered. "It chooses both. It always has. And if you love me, you will not make me choose. You will stand together. With me." The northern forests, once a place of quiet tension, had become a tinderbox. The butchered deer and the symbol of the shattered Fang were not just a provocation, they were a declaration of war. The scent of betrayal was thick in the air, and it threatened to poison the fragile peace. Princess Lyra, her shoulder still humming with the residual pain of the silver hawthorn bolt, stood between her two protectors. The silent understanding that had passed between them, as she lay bleeding, was now their only weapon. "We are being manipulated," Lyra stated, her voice cutting through the cold air. She looked from Kaelen's stormy face to Valerius's icy mask. "The shattered Fang wants a war. They know our strength lies in our unity. So they seek to shatter it." "Their strength lies in the shadows," Valerius murmured, his crimson eyes scanning the treeline. "They are cowards who strike and flee, leaving others to take the blame." Kaelen growled, the sound a promise of violence. "Then we drag them into the light. My trackers can find their den. And my spies already know where it is," Valerius countered. But for the first time, there was no malice in it. It was a simple statement of fact. "An abandoned silver mine, deep in the no-man's land between our territories. The silver interferes with both vampire senses and werewolf tracking. It is why they have remained hidden. A plan, fragile and dangerous, began to form. It would require a level of trust that had never existed before. The trap was set not for the shattered Fong, but for the piece itself. Lyra would appear to have chosen a side. A public argument was staged in the court of the Crimson Moon. Lyra, her voice ringing with false fury, accused the Nightshade vampires of the border attacks. She declared her intention to retreat to the safety of the Silvermane Packlands, turning her back on the vampire court. Lord Valerius played his part with chilling perfection, his face a mask of cold betrayal as he banished her from his sight. The news, carried by spies and whispers, spread like wildfire. The shattered Fong, believing their plan had worked and the hybrid abomination was isolated and vulnerable, saw their chance. They would ambush her convoy on the road to the werewolf lands and slaughter her, ensuring the war they craved. What they did not know was that the convoy was a decoy. Lyra rode in a carriage, flanked by Kaelen's most trusted warriors, but hidden within the surrounding forest, moving with preternatural silence, was the entirety of Valerius's personal guard, the Shadowstalkers. And above, flitting between the clouds, Valerius himself watched like a vengeful god. The ambush came at a narrow mountain pass. The shattered Fong, howling their hatred, descended from the rocks. They were met not by panicked wolves, but by a disciplined phalanx of werewolves who fought with the cold fury of defending their Luna. Just as the battle reached its peak, the shadows themselves came alive. Vampires dropped from the cliffs above, not with wild cries, but in utter silence. They fell upon the flanks of the shattered Fong with surgical precision. Valerius landed in the center of the fray, a whirlwind of elegant death, his movements so fast he was a blur. He did not fight for blood, but for efficiency, disarming and disabling, a predator culling a diseased herd. Kaelen, in his massive wolf form, was a force of pure nature. He fought beside Valerius, not as an ally, but as a perfect, complementary opposite. Where Valerius was precise, Kaelen was overwhelming. Where the vampire created openings, the wolf smashed through them. And in the center of it all was Lyra. She did not hide in the carriage. She stood atop it, a vision of terrifying duality. Her eyes glowed, one amber, one crimson. A silver-edged sword was in one hand, a weapon of her vampire lineage. But her other hand was tipped with claws, a gift of her wolf blood. She was a whirlwind, deflecting arrows with vampire speed, and ripping through attackers with wolfish strength. She was the symbol they were fighting for, and she was leading them. The shattered Fong, faced with the impossible, the united front of their two ancient enemies, led by the very creature they sought to destroy, broke. Their fanaticism turned to panic. The battle was not long, but it was absolute. The leaders of the sect were captured, not killed. They were to be trophies of a new era. The final act took place back at the clearing where it had all begun. Before the assembled lords of the Crimson Court and the elders of the Silvermane Pack, the shattered Fong leaders were forced to their knees. Lyra stood between Kaelen and Valerius. She did not speak of victory or vengeance. She spoke of truth. "You sought to divide us with lies and blood," her voice carried, amplified by her hybrid power, reaching every ear. "You showed us what we should not become. So we will show you what we are." She turned to Kaelen. "Alpha, your justice." Kaelen stepped forward. His verdict was not death. "You are Pack, yet you betrayed the Pack. You are exiled. Your names are struck from our histories. You will wander, alone, forever. A fate worse than death for a wolf." She turned to Valerius. "Lord, your justice." Valerius's smile was cold. "You crave war and chaos. You will have neither. You will be entombed in enchanted sleep, deep within the earth, to dream of the peace you tried to destroy for all eternity." The sentences were carried out immediately. There was no room for appeal. As the traitors were taken away, Lyra reached out. She took Kaelen's warm, calloused hand in her right, and Valerius's cool, smooth one in her left. Then, before the stunned assembly of both species, She joined their hands together over hers. The gesture was electric. A werewolf alpha and a vampire lord, hands clasped, not in violence, but in unity. "The war is over," Lyra declared, her voice ringing with finality. "Not because a treaty says so, but because we choose it. We will rule together. Moon and night. And this realm will know a peace that is not just an absence of war, but a presence of strength." A silence fell, and then, a single howl rose from the werewolf ranks, not of battle but of triumph. It was answered by a wave of approving whispers from the vampires. The sound was dissonant, chaotic, and utterly new. It was the sound of a future being born. And standing at its heart were the three of them, the Alpha, the Lord, and their hybrid princess, who had not chosen between her two natures, or her two loves, but had forged them into something stronger than anyone had ever dreamed possible. The realm, for the first time in its long, bloody history, was truly whole. Under the canopy of stars, in the scent of blood and pine, the werewolf Alpha and the vampire lord did not let go of her hands. They looked at each other again, and for the first time, the look was not of hatred, but of a reluctant, awestruck, and burgeoning respect. The war was over. A new, more complicated, and powerful union had begun.